What's up, everybody? It's Jazz Fuzz. I got finished doing my podcast. So, I was thinking about dark history, and a lot of historians talk about the dark history all over the world, from Africa to Germany to Russia to Japan, China, every continent, every parts of the world. There are dark history. I was watching a lot of dark history that happened. Like, I didn't know about Room 731. And that is where Japanese soldiers did bioweapons against Chinese people, Philippines, some Americans, and some Russian people. And they did experiments on them while they were alive, put in diseases and tortured them and cut them open while they were alive. I mean, it was like really dark. Like, they even injected with animal blood and human blood. Like, it's just crazy. And I saw it in a horror flick, and I was like, Room 731. I'm like, what is that? And I remember in Vietnam, there were stories about how they were torturing the women and how they were torturing men in the Vietnam War. Because the soldiers at that time, they didn't know who was enemy and who was not. And then you know about the orange chemical that affected all those people. And still to this day, from generation to generation, they're still affected by that orange chemical that they did in the Vietnam War. But the reason why I'm bringing up this dark history is because I love history. I think history is very fascinating to me. A lot of people hate history because it's boring and it's long and it's all about people. But to me, it's very fascinating, because it explains about the present. The past always explains about the present. It's kind of backwards, if you will. But there's a reason why I'm saying that. Like in Russia, when World War II was over, the stupid government in United States look at Russia like it was a threat. Now, Russia and United States were friends in one time ago, and they did had a lot of good trade and discussions. They were pretty good people. But when Roosevelt passed away, and I forgot who was the president after him, they look at Russia like a threat. And Russia was confused because we fought by side from World War I and World War II, and there was some other things before World War I and World War II happened that United States and Russia did have somewhat a good relationship. But when the next knucklehead took president, they look at Russia was an enemy. And Russia wasn't not an enemy. They were friends at first. But Russia got so pissed off the way how America government was treated, and they're like, well, fuck y'all then. And now this is the reason why we have this confrontation, and especially what's going on in Ukraine. So I love history because it explains a lot about politics, a way how people think about other countries and stuff. Like, I didn't know that in Korea, well, actually in Japan, they were making fun of the Korean people, saying that some Korean people are slow and they're not intelligent. I didn't know that. I don't know when I read it or I look it up, but it just amazes me how much history explains why people act the way they are. And most of it is dumb stuff. Most of it doesn't have no scientific evidence, no logical evidence. It's just people being cruel and stupid and think they're superior to other different nations and race. I remember I was watching some movies about some dark history as well. But the reason why I'm bringing this up, because I think a lot of people around the world need to learn the dark side of history. Now, we learn a lot about the good and the bad. But the dark side of history is very horrifying. It is much scarier than a horror movie. Much fearful than a horror movie, because this stuff actually really happened. Like, I didn't know the Black Plague happened in California back in the 1900s. Had no idea. You know, people say, so why do teachers and the governments all over the world hide these dark history? Well, they don't want to look as like an asshole, because most of them were. Most of them were assholes back in the day, and everything was about conquer everything, control people, manipulate the information in the system. Back in those times, it was all about human experiment. It was all about manipulation and controlling. It was all about trying to be the first of everything. Even if it has to put the whole nation at risk, they would do anything to be the first to discover something, to do something, to build something, whatever the hell it was. They want to be the first of everything. And I mean, that's really sad. And people, millions of people suffer of the hands of stupid ass government officials and corruption. Same in the United States. They did experience with what is called DLS. You know, they did that to the soldiers. You know, the sea experiments and asylums. They did all kinds of weird shit to do experience people who wasn't even crazy. Like I told my friend, I say people like me who has a learning disability, we would have been put in an asylum because we consider not suitable for society. And then they would have shoved that damn metal thing up my nose and bang on it, or they would do shock. And they did so much worse to those poor souls. You know, I didn't know. My uncle, he explained to me, his girlfriend explained to me that they sterilize people with disability, make sure they didn't have children. You know, I think a lot of countries don't want to talk about the dark history because it makes them look like monsters. And each nation was a monster of their own. The most horrendous and terrifying things they did to people and human beings, it would make people have nightmares. I was scared yesterday. I was going to get nightmares about room 731 because I just feel so depressed and sad to see people getting tortured like that. Anybody around the world, you know? Slavery was even like that, you know? So it's just so sad, and it's just traumatizing. But the world needs to speak about dark history. We talk about the greatness, the good, and the bad, but the dark history is very silent, and we gotta talk about the dark history. This is why they always say history repeats itself, because it does. If we were taught about the dark history about different nations and United States, I guarantee we wouldn't have all this sexism, racism, lower class, middle class, upper class. We wouldn't have all these issues that we're dealing with today, because history teaches us how to cope, but also understand what they did wrong in the past so we don't have to repeat it in the future. But because people are ashamed of what their country and specific group of people had done to another specific group of people, they want to keep it hush-hush. And I think that's dangerous, because look what's happening. Things are repeating itself again. And I come back with my part 2.